It's important to be able to identify the caller and the callee from the content of the SIP message. When receiving a call, the called party probably wants to know who made the call before accepting it. There might also be times when a midway server sits between the caller and the callee, enforcing some kind of policy, perhaps only permitting calls from authorized users. They may also police who receives certain types of call, rejecting those who are unauthorized. Now, these needs depend on identifying the caller and the callee. By the time we're done here, you should know which SIP header identifies the sender of a request or a response, and which header identifies the intended recipient of a request or a response. Oh, and you should also understand the relationship between identity headers and the routing of a request. So, the identity headers, the headers that identify who the request is from and who the request is to. Yes, it's the from and to header. The from header identifies who sent the request, and the to header identifies the guy for whom the request is intended. Simple. Typically, the to and the from headers contain an address of record type address, SIP, username at domain name. But in our simple peer-to-peer call, you'll probably see just an IP address, simply because we haven't defined any domains yet. Now, take note that the to and the from headers are for identity purposes only. They are never used for routing. Once set at the beginning of each transaction, they never change, even if a midway server decides to reroute the request. It could be that a request intended for SIP 1002 is processed at a server, and perhaps because 1002 is away, the request is routed instead to 1003. Now, although the request URI might change, the to and the from headers do not. They remain constant throughout the whole transaction, a constant reference to who sent the request and who it was intended for, even if it didn't get there. Take a look at the to header and the request URI in this outgoing invite. What do you notice? Does anything bother you? Perhaps that the content of the to header is duplicated in the request URI? Why duplicate in two places? Well, remember, the identity headers are never used for routing. This request will be routed to the address in the request URI, not the address in the to header. But, just like we saw a moment ago, the request URI might change as the request travels downstream. The to address, however, won't. It stays the same throughout the whole transaction. Right, I've got my Alice and Bob user agents loaded up, and I'll make a call. And I know already that in Alice's log, because the invite is from Alice, the from header will be Alice. And because the request is intended for Bob, the to header will be Bob. Yes, just as expected. Okay, time for a prediction. When we go to Bob's log and look at the first response that Bob sends back, the 100 trying, whose address will be in the to header and whose address will be in the from header? If your user agents are handy, why not make a call for yourself and find out? Go ahead and press play when you're ready and we'll compare notes. Okay, I'll open Bob's log, scroll down to the 100 trying, which remember will be sent to Alice, and in the to header, it's not Alice, it's Bob. Now, is this response going to Bob? No, it's from Bob to Alice. Well, here's something else for you to remember. When reading the to and the from headers in a response, they're copied directly from the request into the response without any change. They're not swapped over like we might have expected. As said a moment ago, identity headers remain constant throughout the whole transaction. They do not change, even in the response. When reading responses, I remind myself that it's not a response from Dave, the address in the from header. Instead, it's a response to a request that was made from Dave. Okay, identity headers then. The from header identifies the user who sent the request, initiated the transaction, and the to header identifies the intended recipient of the request. To and from headers are never used for routing. Requests are routed to the address in the request URI. To and from headers remain constant throughout the whole transaction, even in responses. They don't get swapped over like some of us might have thought. The request URI, on the other hand, may well change as the request travels through servers on its way downstream.